Joining me today on Impact Catalyst is Brian Strawser, who is the Executive Director and President of Florida 127. Welcome.
Hey, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing great. So let's start, as we are wont to do, with a quick overview of the organization, and then we'll dig in deeper from there.
So, Florida 127, we're a nonprofit organization, launched 6 years ago. As of yesterday was our anniversary. Launched in Hillsborough County, and we're expanding out into all of Tampa Bay with Pasco and Pinellas County. And our main focus, our mission is to connect churches and communities into serving into kids and families impacted by child welfare.
Wonderful. And the main vehicle you have for that is a program, FAM. It's a training program that helps equip churches with the skills to better serve foster families. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the specifics of that?
So what we call them a FAM, it's called a Family Advocacy Ministry. And we operate behind the scenes. We go to churches and find out, where their strengths are, what they do well, how do they want to connect within their own church and then the community at large. And we support them with a lot of tools and resources and knowledge, understanding the needs of child welfare, understanding the complexities involved when you bring in children to your home that have gone through trauma. So we do a lot of training and understanding just to make sure that they can serve not only in the right areas, but most importantly, that they can serve well.
What are the main mechanisms for connecting the folks in the congregation with the foster families? How are you connecting those two?
Yeah, so we've got two main mechanisms. One is when they launch a FAM, as we call it, a Family Advocacy Ministry, one area they can do is they can come to our online training. It's a 4-hour session with about 2 hours of pre-work ahead of time that they can do in the comfort of their own home, from their office. And then they join us for a 4-hour session. We go through all the nuts and bolts of launching their own ministry, which includes training and equipping them, teaching them how to kind of cast a vision with their own congregation. We give them tools, presentations to use, facts, figures, ways to educate and motivate their own congregation to step in, because we really train our ministries to not do it alone, but to gather more and do it together. Then we have a lot of tools and resources, whether it's web-based, email-based, that they can share that message with their own congregation and take steps to build communities around families that are bringing children into their home. Then we have a second tool that we recently launched in July of 2020, and it is a tool called Care Portal. And that's an online platform that really gives an opportunity for churches, individuals, and businesses that can meet tangible needs. Maybe it's a one-time service opportunity that could lead into a relational service opportunity. And that's basically a national platform. One of the things we do very well is finding needs in our own community and then finding a proven solution that's worked throughout the country and bringing that into this area. So we're really excited. We've partnered with Care Portal, who has an incredible web application that we now contract with our system of care, our DCF appointed companies that do child welfare. These caseworkers that are working alongside of struggling families with children can now go online and input a need, a tangible need. Could be anything from a bed, a crib, car seat, car repair, even money for utilities or rent, something to keep this family from falling apart. That now goes to our participating churches all at once. So instead of our caseworker having to pick up the phone and call multiple resources to see who can help, we're leveraging technology to multiply. One ask can go out to 20 churches with individuals, maybe hundreds to 200s at once across our area that could be willing to help meet that need.
So once you've developed this, you've sort of organized the folks in the congregation. They identified what they're good at, identified what they can, how they can best serve. Then how are they connecting mainly with families that are already connected to the congregation, or do you have sort of rails for them to connect out in the general community? And if so, what are those rails?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, first and foremost, if a church wants to build what we call the care communities around a foster family, which is an ongoing serve opportunity, that looks like anywhere from 6 volunteers to maybe even 10 volunteers that serve that family on an ongoing basis. An entry level for that is a family that wants to, maybe they want to bring a meal once a month. So we get 4 of those individuals that serve that family on an ongoing basis. Then we also look for someone that has a heart to work with the children directly. Maybe it's through babysitting, maybe it's through transportation, helping with making appointments and meetings, as well as having a team leader that helps manage that team on an ongoing basis. So that's the model of the care community. And we support our churches. They do some training to make sure that each volunteer knows a bit of what goes on behind the scenes in foster care, a lot about privacy, understanding what they can and can't share once they get engaged with serving, and then how to serve them on an ongoing basis. Our first approach is asking a church to say, who do you have in your congregation that is already doing foster care or kinship care or adoption? And then our charge is, find individuals that can serve them. But then we don't stop there. We ask them to then set their sights once, maybe they've got 4 foster and kinship care families in their congregation. We ask them to set their sights on those 4. But then the next step is to then build a team for a family outside of their congregation within the community. And that's where we help make those connections with our relationships within the child welfare. We can find families that definitely need support that are not part of their church. And then the other continuity point is through Care Portal. That allows caseworkers right away to engage church members that are outside of the church with that tangible type of support, one-time service that often leads into relational opportunities.
So, what have you had to navigate with regard to your relationship with some of the existing providers of foster care? You have the government entities, you have private entities, you have the on-ground caseworkers, and they feel obviously that they're providing at least some of this. I'm sure they also have an interest in some semblance of control, protocol and things like that. And then when they bring sort of factors and players into the game that aren't under their umbrella, does that tend to make them nervous, or do they just see it as a great additional resource? How's that experience been?
Yeah, it's done both. I think anytime, one thing about child welfare, there's always change, and because of that, our child welfare workers are so used to change, but they're also leery of it too, because often changes don't always mean for the better. So we've brought into the Tampa Bay area a new resource that's never been offered before. So naturally, there's some skeptical hesitance to use it. Those that have been blown away because now they have one request that goes out. We've been able to have multiple churches respond to these caseworkers, not just 1, but 2 or 3, and go above and beyond what's needed. So now we're changing that platform where our caseworkers are saying, wow, I didn't know our churches and our communities really cared. They often feel so isolated. They're struggling with the daily activities, and it's a lot of work, and it's some really tough situations that they see. It's been a breath of fresh life for caseworkers to say, wow, I'm going to submit this need and find new volunteers, find new resources, people stepping up to care for others, just not out of a contractual compliance that they are often used to seeing. They're seeing people step up step up just out of nature and goodness to help out our fellow neighbors. So that's been kind of the hidden value of what we see when we do this type of work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The people that are in the trenches actually providing the care or going to focus more on the value. And as you kind of move up the executive ladder, you're going to get more of the bureaucracy and the risk factors and the training and the legal, which is all valid too. But it sounds like, formulating what you offer to align with the autonomy that the caseworkers have to bring in some of these resources and just plug them in because they are boots on the ground seems to be a pretty efficient way to get connected.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way the Care Portal technology is designed, it puts the caseworker always in the forefront. Because the value there is they understand, they've worked with the families, they have a goal in mind in collaboration with that family. So our church is able to say, wow, this is a vetted need that we can augment and help support alongside and not do it on our own. At the same time, the technology allows each and every request to be handled with that, allowing that caseworker to drive that based on what that family needs. Some situations, the caseworker can say, you know what, we need this item, we need a bed, but it would be better for the caseworker to deliver that bed. And we always honor that. Other times, the caseworker says, you know what, it would be great if you could bring that bed to the family. And that's a great opportunity for our church to connect into that family and ask and say, how else can we help serve and bring more supports into that? So it really gives the autonomy and puts the caseworker in the lead so that we're a new additional resource, not a competing or a untrained person that's going to cause problems.
Right. And so when you look at the programming, at its most precise with regard to messaging, it says disadvantaged foster care environment. But it seems like a lot of what you do could be more generally useful than that to just foster care or even just family care in general. What's sort of the strategy you have with how specific and pointed to just that demographic that you want to stay versus how much you support just an open-ended use of the resources?
Yeah, so the platform is always designed for having a child at the heart of the need. And that's the differentiating factor of some of the other ministries that do great work out there. So it's always designed, there's a child at the heart. And then we believe the best way to help that child is to support its family through the churches and through communities that can help support. So that's the foremost. And then that comes in a whole variety of where in that child welfare spectrum is this family. Often, what we've been able to do is engage the church now more in prevention than ever before. Years ago, churches started really stepping up, but the biggest ask was, and the only ask was, bring a child into your own home. You know, and that's what churches equated. The foster care movement was that we've got to bring the child into our own home, and that's definitely a need. But it's also a calling that we really believe is it's not for everybody, and people have different seasons that they can help. So with the Care Portal platform, we're able to tap into resources, people within our churches and communities at all different seasons of life, and support families to keep them from disrupting. We can give tangible resources now through our collaboration with Hillsborough County and Eckerd. We've got caseworkers that are working alongside of families to keep them from having the children removed. And when we can place our resources there, that's so much more valuable to our community, to our families, and to reduce the number of kids that go into foster care. So if we can have our church engaged at the forefront, and now we're doing that with these caseworker connections, whereas before we didn't know anything about these families that were struggling because there was no connection point.
Yeah, and as you describe some of the services, that's why it kind of led me to ask that question about the demographic because when you become a foster parent, there are some minimum resource requirements that you have. There's a pretty lengthy process that you have to go through. And so typically people don't become foster parents if they're in that state of jeopardy financially or foundationally. So when you look at those folks, the folks that have made it through the process to become foster parents, how would you class? What are the top two or three needs that those folks need that you help with?
Absolutely. So that's why I launched into nonprofit, into ministry. My wife and I were foster parents, and through 15 years ago, and we learned a hard way of how alone and isolating that can be, because most people don't understand the depths and the breadths of that journey. So that's where we employ the model for care communities, for churches to build that wraparound support team of individuals that are willing to step up and serve that family, whether it's bringing a meal, whether it's calling a week to check in on them, whether it's helping with transportation, helping with babysitting, or doing life with that family. And every volunteer that serves in that capacity comes to an orientation at the church. So they spend, an hour, maybe 2 hour time learning a little bit about trauma, learning a bit about privacy. And so every volunteer is equipped. And the best part is we train the church leaders to do these volunteer teams on behalf of the family. Because when a family gets licensed to become a foster parent, one of their to-do items is build their own team. And it's so hard to build your own team in terms of capacity and also desire, because many times we walk into it thinking, hey, I'm going to be okay, I'm good, I don't need help. And it's learning to be vulnerable, learning to accept help, that our families can really thrive when we can demonstrate. We've got individuals within your congregation or in a church that you don't even go to that simply want to help and want to invest in you so that you don't do the load alone. We've got individuals that they're not in their season to bring children into their own home, but they're in a season to support you. That's where we have the biggest win. And the success of that program that's really what we launch after, is that on the average, from a national perspective, 50% of the families that step up and bring a child into their home with foster care, they quit in the first year. So year number 2, they do not continue. And that's one of the reasons for the shortage of foster families. When they're provided with this wraparound support, we increase that success rate to more than 90%, which is huge. And so now we can invest in the families that we're already investing in training to get them up and running, now that we can keep them. And not only are we looking at keeping that family successful, but it's so important when we remove a child from a dangerous situation or an unhealthy, unsafe environment, and put that child in a temporary placement. We want it to be as few moves as possible. Ideally, we want it to be one move and then move back to mom and or dad once they can demonstrate that they have healed and improved to care for their children. So when our families can last longer in a temporary status, it's ultimately better for the healing and health of that child.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Churches are certainly there's tremendous amount of stored positive energy, and anytime you can create an outlet for that does good for the community, and it's a very valuable release of that energy onto in places that can really help. Thank you for doing that. How can folks watching this find out more and connect?
Yeah, thank you. They can go to florida127.org and they can navigate through. There's a care portal tab where they can sign up to receive notifications, and as well as sign up for church training to engage their church. So we also have business opportunities. We are engaging businesses to sign up with us through Care Portal. and be what we call a community champion, where a business could actually enroll their employees to receive email notifications of these real-time needs that are entered by caseworkers. So a employee with our local businesses could receive these needs and click on it and read a little bit more about it and choose if they want to help. They can simply fund a need, or they can actually donate an item and come alongside of a church, meet that family, and help them out.
Wonderful. I've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for joining me, and we'll look forward to watching your continued good work in the community.
Joe, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me, and appreciate the work that you continue to do.